Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another weekly live stream here on Suns Digest. I'm your host, Bruce Velez, and today's weekly live stream, we have some things to discuss. As with the Suns, they have been mentioned in the news areas revolving around Jonathan Kuminga and stuff like that. But as conflicting reports have been going back and forth from the videos that I have made on the channel, you can kind of understand that it doesn't seem very likely of happening. So instead of dwindling and talking about that news and going into that stuff, I wanted to get an exercise going and something that I think would be very fun, which is looking at the Phoenix Suns and comparing them to the rest of the Western Conference here, trying to place where I think they ultimately will fall. And ultimately, we can go over if you guys think that is right or wrong, comparing the rest of these Western Conference teams against the other rosters here in the West. So I think it's going to be a fun exercise. I hope you guys are excited. Thank you guys for all being here and hanging out. We got Z-Balla the GOAT saying what's up, how you doing? Doing good. Saul is also here asking a question. I'll get to that in a second. And we got Dwight Vanderpool. What's up, guys? How you guys doing? Saul's question before we get into the breakdown here goes, wonder why the Suns don't try for Giddey as much as they have gone for Jonathan Kuminga. That has been a little bit of a discussion in the Suns media space and, Suns fan base. I've seen some articles over on Bright Side of the Sun written about that. And a lot of people in the fan base have been asking that question, not only just you saw, but in my comment section as well, because I think Josh Giddey can be this solid playmaker and could be that potential point guard to play alongside Devin Booker for the duration of his career. Now, one thing that I do think when looking at Josh Giddey compared to Jonathan Kuminga is I think that Jonathan Kuminga fits what they want in a wing player that can be a developmental piece alongside Devin Booker, right? They already have Kama Malawach, who was their center that they just drafted. They believe in him. They have Devin Booker and Jalen Green in that guard room. I don't think they want to have three guards in that room, and Josh Giddey, Jalen Green, and Devin Booker all competing, trying to be that secondary star, specifically with Jalen Green and Josh Giddey competing, because they do believe that Jalen Green can rise to that occasion and be that secondary ball handler, secondary scorer within this unit here alongside Devin Booker. So I think that's kind of the case for that ballpark. I ultimately don't know where Josh Giddey's, who's interested in him, what he's really getting offered, in my opinion, because I think it's been very radio silent from what the Bulls have kind of said. It's been reported that he's obviously not going. He wasn't at Summer League with the Bulls watching them. He obviously wants $30 million. But like the other restricted free agents, Quentin Grimes, Cam Thomas, Jonathan Kuminga, they all seemingly want a little bit more than what these teams are willing to give them. And that's because, once again, the teams have the leverage, but also because of these aprons, it's very difficult to give these guys these long-term contracts because you put yourself in a situation where you have an untradeable young guy that doesn't really pan out making $25-30 million a year. If you're a team to realistically flip to go in a direction to compete or to strip down, you'd have to either A, include a bunch of draft capital to get off said piece if they don't pan out, or B, have to buy them out. And what we've seen with this free agency is a lot of players have gotten bought out, right? Jordan Clarkson got bought out, Bradley Beal got bought out, Damian Lillard got bought out, DeAndre Ayton got bought out, and teams are trying to avoid those type of contracts in trading for them, acquiring for them, signing them their own players to those contracts if they don't truly believe in them that they can take that next step. And I think that's where these kind of teams are with Josh Giddey as well. You think he fits better than Jonathan Kuminga? I don't know about that. Josh Giddey, solid playmaker. He can be a great on-ball guy to set up this offense and kind of do that, but he's not the greatest defender. And again, this team needs defense at the guard position, I truly do think. I don't think Jalen Green's a spectacular defender, but his aggressiveness and his willingness to go downhill and be a little bit, I guess, more of like a slasher, I think kind of gives me the fact that he'll just be a little bit more aggressive on the defensive end. Personally, I want a playmaking defensive point guard for this team. I know someone wrote about it on Bright Side of the Sun for us today, looking at potential pieces that the Suns could get, analytically. And one of the players that they wrote about was Andrew Nembhard. I think he'd be kind of a perfect fit for this Suns team, potentially down the line. He kind of does all the things that you would want to do in a, I guess, combo-esque playmaking, defensive, scrappy point guard. I think Cason Wallace from the Thunder is another type of player that they would like to get potentially down the line, or someone that I think they should get kind of down the line, or some sort of, player in the mix of those two kind of builds for the point guard position to kind of build up with this team. Who is more likely to be starting, Rasheer Fleming or Ryan Dunn? Ryan Dunn, 100%. I don't think Rasheer Fleming is going to be starting. Rasheer Fleming, from what I kind of can conclude from what people have kind of mentioned about the starting lineups and stuff like that, he does seem like he'll be competing for that backup power forward spot. My guess is, I know I talked about how like Oso in the starting lineup, but I do think the starting lineup will be Ryan Dunn, Dillon Brooks at that 3-4, Mark Williams at that 5, with Jalen Green and Devin Booker at the 1 and the 2. Colin Gillespie, as of the roster stands right now, Colin Gillespie would be playing that backup point guard. Grayson Allen would be playing that backup shooting guard. Then you could argue who's going to be playing those backup 3 and 4 minutes. I think you could say Royce O'Neal, Rasheer Fleming, maybe Nigel Hayes-Davis, but he might be a little bit lower on the totem pole compared to some of the younger guys. Oso Ighodaro, Kama Malawach, and Nick Richards, I think, would all compete for those backup 3, 4, and 5 minutes. But I think Rasheer Fleming would most likely be a rotational piece as a bench player. Who's JG? JG is on our team. If you're talking about Josh Giddey, I don't know if they can get Josh Giddey at the trade deadline. It all depends on what type of contract he gets, because once again, they'd have to figure out if he's making $18 million. I know that they're out of the second aprons now. They have the flexibility, but they're going to have the right contracts to trade to the Bulls or whatever team signs him to kind of get the right deal done ultimately. So I don't necessarily know if they'll be able to trade for Josh Giddey or Jonathan Kuminga at the deadline. And Jonathan Kuminga doesn't want to be on the Golden State Warriors. So I do think he kind of wants to go somewhere else, and I don't think that, he can always go back, but I don't think that that's his main goal. I think if he goes somewhere else, he's not going to want to go there and then get traded. But without further ado, let's dive in and let's get into what the stream is about today. As we dive in and explore this, and I'll come back up here so you can see me, but we have the tier list. And in this tier list, we're going to be ranking the teams where the Suns could fall. And first, we're going to do the Suns, obviously, and then we're going to edit the tiers and go back in. But, as you can see, every Western Conference team is listed down here. We're going to grab them, drag them up, explain where I think they fall. There are 4 categories here for this tier list. There is Tier 1, which is the Western Conference Finals, which will be the 2 teams that I think will be in the Western Conference Finals, or the top 2 teams in the West throughout the regular season. Tier 2 will be the playoff teams. That will be teams from slates 3, 4, 5, and 6, where they obviously are a guaranteed playoff spot and don't have to participate in the play-in. Tier 3 is obviously the play-in, which is 7, 8, 9, and 10. Those final 2 playoff spots with the 2 play-in teams is obviously a 7th or 8th seed will definitely make the playoffs, but one of them could potentially fall out if the 9-10 wins both of those games. And then we'll dive into the not in playoff tier, which will be the 5 remaining teams down below. So let's start it off. And like I mentioned, the first team we're going to be talking about is the Phoenix Suns, and I'm going to be putting them in the play-in tier as of right now. And I know a lot of people could disagree with that, maybe think that they're in the playoff tier, but I think play-in is probably the best area. I don't know necessarily if that's a 7 to 8 seed play-in. I don't know if that's a 9 to 10 seed play-in. We'll get into that in a little bit. With Devin Booker being this number 1 option here for the Phoenix Suns, obviously losing Bradley Beal and Kevin Durant, they're going to be a little bit worse offensively, but that's going to allow Devin Booker to go back to that, MVP, hopefully type of Booker that we saw when they were trying to go to the finals, where he can lead this offense and be this central focus of that, where guys like Jalen Green, Ryan Dunn, Mark Williams, Dillon Brooks can play off of it and be able to work as a cohesive unit to construct a solid squad around Booker. We're obviously going to see the rise of some players. The team is going to be more younger, which is honestly going to make them more athletic, hustle more on defense, and be a little bit better on that side of the ball. I do think they will be better defensively. I do think they will be a little obviously worse offensively, and that will kind of put them into this kind of middling tier. I do think there's a lot of teams that are very similar to the Phoenix Suns in this category. So when we do get to them, we will, move them up and down the list. But I do think at the best, the Phoenix Suns could be the 8th seed personally. And I do think at the worst, they could potentially be out of this play-in scenario in general. But right now, I'm going to be putting them in the play-in category because I do think they have enough talent to make the play-in, but I don't necessarily justify them to kind of be that outstanding team in the Western Conference. Next, Oklahoma City Thunder. They're obviously going to be better than the Phoenix Suns. They're going to be going into my Western Conference Finals category. The defending NBA champions lost seemingly nobody. They only lost Dylan Jones, who they traded for Kobe Jones, and they brought in Thomas Sorber as that replacing spot. Once again, SGA, Chet Holmgren, Jalen Williams, all going to stay healthy, can still compete. Caruso, Lou Dort, Hartenstein, Cason Wallace getting better, Isaiah Joe, Aaron Wiggins, Ousmane Dieng. This team is going to be still one of the top. I do think they might have to make some consolidation moves here if some of these pieces don't really work, because the West is a little bit stronger now with everybody kind of to compete against OKC to dethrone them. But I do think that if the Thunder get into that position where they have to move up a couple contracts, or if some guys get injured, they could go out there and do that to make this team even more stacked with the amount of draft capital they have, with the young talent and prospects that they still do have on their roster as well. Not to mention Nikola Topic, who I just forgot, their top 6 pick from last year's draft, who was out the entire rookie season, is going to be making his debut. I obviously would put them over the Phoenix Suns here in this category. I don't think that the Suns are going to be competing with the Thunder. They couldn't last year with their roster construction, and you could say that this team might be better fit to be a winning team this season, but obviously when you're looking at the namesake of this roster compared to last year's, it's not better. So clearly, the Thunder are going to be better than the Suns. The Blazers are the next team, and the Blazers I'm going to put in the play-in category as well, right alongside the Phoenix Suns. The Blazers made some good additions this offseason, obviously bringing back Damian Lillard, but that's not going to kick into play this year because he's going to be out for the season rehabbing his Achilles. But they waived DeAndre Ayton, they traded Anthony Simons for Drew Holiday, and they have some young players that are on the rise. Shaedon Sharpe had a good second half of the season, Scoot Henderson had a good second half of the season last year. Shaedon Sharpe looked pretty solid as a wing scorer for them and a slasher. They had Toumani Camara and Denny Avila look like these very, very solid wings for them, in my opinion. And I do think that this Blazers team is going to continue to grow as a younger unit. Last year they finished 12th or 13th in the Western Conference, I do believe, but did have a stretch of basketball where they went on like a 7 to 8 game win streak, and I think we could see that kind of transpire with this Blazers team going into the season. I think they fall really close to the Phoenix Suns. I do think the Suns have a better team per se because they're led by Devin Booker. I do think that star-led power will be able to, overpower a little bit of a young team, but the Blazers are very, very effective on the defensive end. And if the Phoenix Suns are already looking a little weak on the offensive end here going into the season, that could be a struggle in some of these matchups when they do play against the Blazers. So as of right now, I think they're going to be right next to each other, currently sitting in the play-in. The Sacramento Kings are another team that I think is going to be in this conversation. They're going to be going into that play-in category behind the Blazers and the Suns for many reasons. I think the Kings are a little bit in a confusion here with their direction. They have Zach LaVine and DeMar DeRozan. Who knows where DeRozan's going to go? There was rumors that he's going to be traded all offseason, and he still hasn't been moved. So will he get bought out? Will they somehow figure something out after this Jonathan Kuminga situation, because they're involved with him as well, including with the Suns? We'll have to keep our eyes on it. Domantas Sabonis is there. He could potentially request a trade at any time. They signed Dennis Schroeder. They want Russell Westbrook. They're willing. They had no trade value for Malik Monk. They're willy-nilly throwing Devin Carter in deals. They're not extending Keon Ellis. I really, really don't understand where the Sacramento Kings are going, to be honest. I think they're retrospectively the Chicago Bulls of the West. They're just a mess. And I think playing, just from looking at their roster perspective, you could argue that they could be in that conversation because they were last year. But with the West getting stronger, they also could be in a worse situation. If you compare the Suns roster to this team. Obviously, Levine, Sabonis, and DeRozan, name-wise, is better than Devin Booker, Kama Malawach, and Jalen Green. But I do think that the Suns' style of play would be able to beat the Sacramento Kings, as they're not great on defense. They heavily rely on three-pointers, and if this offense isn't flowing, then they're not going to be that great. Both teams coming in with newer coaches. Obviously, the Sacramento Kings using their associate from last year after firing Mike Brown, so we'll have to see how that translates going into this year. I think the Kings could be bumped down to not in playoff team, but we'll have to wait and see. The Spurs are a team that I think are going to be better than the Phoenix Suns, and I think they're going to take that leap this season with Victor Wembanyama at the throne. They were rumored to be in the Kevin Durant sweepstakes, didn't want to get involved because they didn't want to give up too much capital, and I think that was a smart decision for them. Ultimately, they're able to keep their number 2 overall pick, select Dylan Harper. They still have, obviously, Stephon Castle, the rookie of the year from last year. They traded for De'Aaron Fox. They have Victor Wembanyama, who's supposedly going to be healthy going into the season, not dealing with the blood clotting issue. They added Luke Cornett. They traded for Kelly Olynyk. They drafted Carter Bryant. This team is setting itself up to be effective, and these young players like Devin Vassell, Jeremy Sohan, Keldon Johnson, they are on tradable contracts for this Spurs team. Devin Vassell makes roughly, I think, around $25 to $30 million. Jeremy Sohan is still on his rookie year deal, and Keldon Johnson makes roughly around $15 million. And with the Spurs having this flexibility going into the season, if one of those players doesn't really stand out, or if they need an additional role that they currently are lacking, potentially in the wing position or with a defensive point guard, they have the contracts and the draft capital to go out and reshape this roster. They went and did that, bringing in De'Aaron Fox basically for scraps for them as expiring contracts, or contracts that weren't really playing for them last year, and they didn't even get to see the full potential of the Victor Wembanyama De'Aaron Fox duo. I completely believe that with, once again, the defensive play of Stephon Castle in the guard room, having Dylan Harper being that secondary playmaker to run that unit, Devin Vassell shooting on the wing, Keldon Johnson's athletic abilities, Jeremy Sohan's passing and ability to switchable, be a defender, with Carter Bryant also being a three-point shooter and being a switchable defender. Their main problem was Victor Wembanyama was completely awful when the Spurs were awful when Victor was off the court. Now they filled that with Luke Cornett, who is the best backup big in the NBA. I will say it. He does everything that the Spurs will need him to do. And coming from a system like Boston, now going to San Antonio, they're both well-respected franchises. I expect him to fit in like a glove. Adding Kelly Olynyk as a spatial and shooting big man to kind of compensate for Luke Cornett's ability to just be a rim runner and a passing big and a rebounder. I think the Spurs are going to take that leap. I could potentially see them being in this playoff discussion, but ultimately I do think the Spurs will finish right outside of that, where they're the 7th, 8th seed, but I think they'll lock themselves going into the playoffs. Victor Wembanyama, it's his year 3. Let's see that leap take off. Next, the Jazz. The first team I can say I full-heartedly know that is not a playoff team. The Jazz this offseason maybe held on to some contracts for a little bit long and had to bite the bullet of that. They had to waive Jordan Clarkson. They traded away John Collins for Kevin Love and Kyle Anderson. They traded away Colin Sexton for Yusuf Nurkic. They're not going to be good. They're clearly stating that they don't want to be good. They got all these bad expiring contracts. They did good in the draft. They're trying to find out who is going to be their next star to really take over, right? They draft Ace Bailey. They really did go out and get a guy in Walter Clayton from the March Madness tournament that was very solid as a shot creator and scorer, has that confidence, especially in a guard room that hasn't had that guard to really take that leap in Keontae George or Isaiah Collier yet. I think adding Walter Clayton to that mix can really not only push those guys to be a little bit better, but prove to you who's going to be that standout guard in that rotation and who you could potentially move off of to fill other pieces. They obviously have Kyle Filipowski, who looked really good in the summer league, Walker Kessler, who could potentially be a trade asset, Lauri Markkanen, who I think eventually will be on the move, if it's not this offseason, by the trade deadline, because I think the Jazz will want to tank. It just doesn't make sense for the Jazz to want to compete, specifically in a stacked Western Conference where they don't even know who their number one star is yet. Makes sense to put them here. Next, the Dallas Mavericks. This is tough. This is tough. They're okay. The Kings are going into the non-playoffs. They're going to be better than the Jazz, but they're not making the playoffs. From looking at all these other teams, they're not making the playoffs. It's just going to be said. The Mavs, I'll put them in the play-in as now, but like I don't know. And that it's because the middle teams haven't really been found yet. I haven't been able to kind of break those down, but the Mavs I think would be really good. I think the Mavs, Cooper Flag, the number one overall pick, Anthony Davis. They do have a logjammed front court with Daniel Gafford, PJ Washington, and stuff like that. No Kyrie for the start of the year, but I think they will make moves. I think throughout the season, when Kyrie does come back, that this Mavericks team will be kind of somewhat afloat, maybe around that 9-10 seed. And then once you add Kyrie Irving to this unit, it's only going to make it a little bit better. Like I mentioned, they still have the flexibility to move a Daniel Gafford if they want to keep Derek Lively and run with them. They still have the flexibility to move a PJ Washington if they don't want to extend him, a Klay Thompson, etc., etc. I do think that they are, in a situation kind of like the Suns where it is kind of that one star in the beginning with Anthony Davis versus kind of Devin Booker kind of leading their teams. But obviously the Mavs have a little bit more veteran depth and have been in better positions than the Phoenix Suns these last couple of years with their head coaching staff, that I think they're going to be a little bit better than the Suns. But I do think, especially when Kyrie Irving does come back in the second half. But that being said, I think they're kind of in this tier. I think they're a little bit worse than the Spurs, though. Next, the Nuggets. The Nuggets. Come on, boys. Let's go. The Nuggets are my 2 seed. The Nuggets and the Thunder are the top 2 teams in the West. Surprised? Probably not. The Nuggets this year obviously made some big moves. They traded away their 2032 overall first-round pick, basically sacrificing their future for Jokic, and went and got Cam Johnson. They traded away Michael Porter Jr. They brought back Bruce Brown. They brought back a bunch of veteran minimum contracts into this team, and they went and traded for Jonas Valanciunas. They won the fight for Jonas Valanciunas with Panathinaikos in Greece. They're going to get their backup center. DeRon Holmes is coming bouncing back off an ACL. We'll see where he can make some improvements for them in their front court. I just think that these are the top 2 teams. The Nuggets pushed the Thunder to their limits the most in the playoffs, right? The Nuggets and Thunder went 7 games. Both of those games, it was just, one offense really dominating the other, one defense really shutting down the other's offense. I think for the Nuggets here, they add more depth, which is going to make them be able to combat a little bit more versus the Oklahoma City Thunder, and it will allow them to not basically just lose games because Michael Porter Jr. can't hit an open 3. At least they have a little bit more versatility within their lineup and have a little bit more flexibility to make those moves. This opens now for them to extend Christian Braun down the line and still be able to keep this kind of core intact, while still having the flexibility of guys like Peyton Watson and Julian Strawther and stuff to potentially dangle out there on the market to get either veteran guys or to fill in those rotations spots and when they continue to grow, when these veteran contracts kind of do age out. I do think for the Denver Nuggets, this is the spot they deserve to be. You could say they potentially could be in the playoff, but I do think they are in the Western Conference Finals. So as of now, Thunder and Nuggets are my top 2. I think the Kings and the Jazz are not making the playoffs. And as the play-in stands, as of now, we have the Spurs, the Mavs, the Suns, and the Blazers. So let's get into it some more. The next team to discuss is the Warriors. The Warriors have been very quiet this offseason. They haven't really been doing much. Obviously, they're still mulling their Jonathan Kuminga situation, but besides that, they've lost Kevon Looney, but they're basically expected to sign Al Horford, expected to bring back Anthony Melton, potentially working to bring back Gary Payton, and a bunch of other moves behind the scenes. Once this Kuminga situation kind of gets solved, they'll actually do their decision making, which a team with Stephen Curry and Jimmy Butler and Draymond Green, even if it is a little bit older in this Western Conference, I think they're going to still be in some conversation. So they're going in the play-in tier. They're going to go... Because the roster's not built as of now, I'll put them here, which would move the Blazers out of the playoffs. But we're putting them ahead of the Kings. Next, the Rockets. This is easy. They add Kevin Durant. They add Dorian Finney-Smith. You could argue that even as the number 2 team in the Western Conference last year, it'd be criminal to say that they drop from 2 to 3 with adding Kevin Durant, adding Dorian Finney-Smith, adding Clint Capella, restructuring Fred VanVleet's contract, and keeping all their depth pieces together. But I do think that the Denver Nuggets are a little bit better than the Rockets. The Rockets are going to be an impressive offensive and defensive team. I just do think that the Nuggets with Jokic is just going to be a little bit more overpowering. But we could see the rise and growth of guys like Amen Thompson, Alperen Şengün, Tari Eason, Jabari Smith really show through and start to maybe change that matter of the fact to put the Rockets in this contention spot. Once again, I do think it's kind of neck and neck between the Nuggets and the Rockets. I do think that they're better than the Suns. It's clearly obvious that that's the case. They were better than them last year, and now they are adding better players. They're going to be better. Clippers, they're going to be going into that conversation as well alongside the Rockets. They are a little bit worse than the Rockets, in my opinion, just because they are, quote-unquote, the UNC squad, but I would be lying if I said that I'm not going to be secretly rooting for this Clippers team this season. Obviously, with the signing of Chris Paul, it is going to be funny to see them being there. But Chris Paul, James Harden, Bradley Beal, Kawhi Leonard, Ivica Zubac, John Collins, Chris Dunn, Derrick Jones Jr., Nicholas Batum. There's so many interchangeable pieces within this roster. Once again, like we mentioned, it is a older roster. I think their average age, besides some of their younger guys, is like 28 or 29 or something like that. It is really, really bad. So for the Clippers here, it is going to come to show once it gets to playoff time, obviously, what's really happening. Can they be healthy to make these moves? Chris Paul is expected not really to play that much. Bradley Beal, I think, on a $5 million deal and in this type of role for the Clippers is going to look a lot better than he did on the Phoenix Suns. Zubac is a top 5 big. They added John Collins. I completely forgot to mention that they added Brook Lopez as well as a backup center. This team just really is going in this all 2-year push with Kawhi, with Harden. They've structured this team for this reason, with all their guys either being expiring this year or next year, so that in 2 seasons they can completely clear the books, just have Zubac on the roster, and then have the potential of being a key free agent spot, being in LA, to sign guys and continue to build their roster that way. So I do like the direction that this Clippers team is going. Do think they'll be better than the Suns. Ultimately, like I said, they just have... There's really no explanation as like we should understand. The Suns just aren't in a good spot. The Clippers have a better roster put together. Next, the Lakers. The Lakers puzzle me, guys. The Lakers puzzle me because they have LeBron, they have Luka, they have DeAndre Ayton. Oh my God. Like, they're probably going to be a playoff team, a play-in team. I'll give them play-in. But I don't think they're going to be anything spectacular. They've kind of already made that notion forward that they're not going all in to win this year. They're going all in for next offseason. Will that be telling if a LeBron trade comes through? I don't know. But as we kind of look at their roster now, I do think that they'll try to be in the playoffs or in the play-in at least to make some noise. But obviously they're not going to be winning it. They were, the 3 seed last year? Obviously with a little bit of different scaling because when they got Luka and LeBron, they just started to really take off. I think play-in's comfortable for now. I think behind the Spurs makes sense too. I just think the Spurs are a little bit more built and complete. The Pelicans, we'll just put them here. We'll get the Pelicans over with. They're not in the playoffs. I don't know why they traded their first-round pick. Doesn't really make much sense. They have no number 1 option because Zion's going to be hurt half the time, I do think. Herb Jones and Trey Murphy are very, very solid. They look really good. I don't know if they're good enough to be in the play-in. Derek Queen, Jeremiah Fears, they're 2 rookies. We'll have to see how they look. Once again, they added Jordan Poole for CJ McCollum. That doesn't really scream to me like, oh yeah, this is going to make us be better and more competitive. I don't know. I think Pelicans and the Jazz are probably the worst 2 teams here, in my opinion. And then we got the Grizzlies and the Timberwolves. The Timberwolves, let's move them. They're going to be my 6 seed, or my 5 seed, excuse me. Just for the sheer factor that they made the Western Conference Finals back-to-back years. They extended everybody. They kept Naz Reid. They didn't go for the Kevin Durant trade. They didn't lose anybody besides Nickeil Alexander-Walker, who, yes, will be, a big piece that they do miss. But obviously having the young guns of Rob Dillingham, Terrence Shannon, and even John Berenger, who looked good in Summer League, hopefully can fill those roles and minutes for them in the type of minutes that Nickeil Alexander-Walker was given. They can run different lineups. I think the Timberwolves are still going to be a top team in the West. Next and last, the Grizzlies. Traded Desmond Bane, as we all know. Got Cedric Coward, still going to be a young, exciting team. Jaren Jackson, John Morant, going to be fun. New coach. All right. So, this is how it's going to be. This is how it's going to be, unfortunately. So looking at this list, we got the Thunder 1, Nuggets 2, top 2 teams. The Rockets 3, really solid playoffs culture already, built from their team last year. Young guys still continuing to get better. Added DFS, added KD, added Clint Capella. Clippers, really solid playoff team last year, lost in the first round. Going to continue to add guys like they just did all their veterans. They're going to be a top team. Timberwolves maybe could pass the Clippers if they have a lot of injuries, but I do think that the Clippers will be ahead of them just because I think they have a little bit more depth than the Timberwolves are. They're banking in a lot of the younger guys in my eyes. The Spurs, I think, are going to be that young, fun, exciting team that takes that leap. De'Aaron Fox, Dylan Harper, Victor Wembanyama, they're set to make the stage. That's where the Lakers and Warriors kind of come in as those 7 and 8 seeds. I do think there's the possibility of the Warriors and Lakers being a little bit better, obviously with having Steph Curry and LeBron James, Luka Doncic, and Jimmy Butler being on those rosters. But I do think that the age maybe does catch up to LeBron and Curry and Jimmy this kind of season, and some of these younger players do kind of start passing them, and we do kind of see Father Time coming into this Lakers squad, and maybe Luka isn't able to lead them enough offensively to take them into this promised land. Who knows? They could be a top 5 seed. I could just be spewing, but I do think that as of right now that these two would be here. The Grizzlies and the Mavericks at 9 and 10. I do think you could argue the Suns, maybe even the Blazers being ahead of one of the Grizzlies or the Mavericks, but standing at this point, I do think by the end of the season with the Mavericks getting Kyrie back, having all that flexibility in trade, and with the Grizzlies having their new head coach playing through John Morant, wanting to play through that system with Jaren Jackson, I do think they will be a little bit better. If injuries do come into play to one of these rosters, then I do see the Suns being that 10 seed and kind of coming into it. But similarly to last season, I have the Phoenix Suns finishing 11th in the Western Conference, just where they fell last season when they had the 10th overall pick. Not where you would want to see the Phoenix Suns, unfortunately, but this is where I think with this roster, with the rookies, with their direction, with how everyone looks in the Western Conference, with their rosters kind of set up, I do see them falling. Could they be better than some of the teams ahead of us if they do have some injury-riddled seasons? I do think so. Could some of these teams behind the Phoenix Suns surprisingly be better than them? That's also possibly the case. Ultimately, though, like we've kind of said, I didn't think that the Suns were really that showcasing this year that they wanted to be in that top mix because they're resetting and trying to get everything good to go for the future seasons. And that's what's kind of implicative with this list here. Thank you, Saul. Just saw this message here, but he's saying, going to be interesting. Oh, we'll close out of this, and we'll go back to here, where we are with you, and you said this. Going to be interesting to see you on Locked On Suns. Ben Garcia is great, and I appreciate that. so much, Saul. I was on Locked On Suns. You guys will see that episode coming out, I believe, today or this evening. I don't know when, but it was an awesome time. Luckily enough, Ben was gracious to reach out to me as I was to have him on my show, and we had a great discussion talking about some fun things. And I hope you enjoy that episode, and let me know what you think down below in the comment section. I really do appreciate that, and I'm very excited to be able to do this by being on Suns Digest. It's allowed me to have these other conversations, have these other connections with other creators, and I think it's going to be great. I'm excited about this Sun team. Might be false hope. I mean, I'm excited too. I'm definitely excited just because I think they're going to be the 11th seed here in the Western Conference from my predictions so far. It doesn't mean I think it's going to be a bad season. I think it's going to be very intriguing to see what these young players look like, right? I think if you're a Suns fan, you kind of got to go with these expectations of not looking at the record, but looking at what you see from this team, right? The first thing that we're going to look at is how Devin Booker works by himself in this offense, right? And if he can coexist by himself and be very dominant in this kind of style of play, then I can see the Suns still looking for a secondary scorer, but trying to either find that within their team or, developing one of their players to do so that they can complement that. If that's not the case, Devin Booker kind of needs a little bit more offensive help. Maybe the Suns look at it on the trade market to go add another piece if one of these players like a Jalen Green or one of these younger guys isn't really panning out. Next year, they definitely have more cap space as well with guys coming off the books, and with maybe Grayson Allen and Royce O'Neal being 2-year contracts instead of 3, maybe they're a little bit easier to trade for the Phoenix Suns, and they can kind of move off of those. They also have more draft capital coming into play as they, I believe, stay under the luxury tax going into this season. They get the 2033 first-round pick, which they can then use potentially in trades, similar to how they used their 2031 first-round pick last trade deadline to get 3 first-round picks. Like I mentioned, though, I do think it's a season to watch what this Suns team does, evaluate Devin Booker, evaluate Jalen Green, see how he looks as a second co-star, kind of see the development of these rookies. How does Malawach look? How does Rasheer Fleming look? How does Kobe Brea look? Then looking at some of these other contracts as well. Is Grayson Allen playing really well by the trade deadline? Is he a positive asset that we can move off of because we don't necessarily need him for the future? Similar with Royce O'Neal. How does Colin Gillespie fit into this rotation? Is he someone that looked really good because the Suns were such a bad product last season that he just shined? Or can he actually be that backup point guard that the Suns fans want to see thrive in this rotation and take that next step for them? That's what I want to see from this Suns team. Ultimately, watching Jordan Ott as well, seeing how he can control this offense and this defense, this locker room, because obviously we know that the stuff on the court wasn't great with the Suns, but off the court, in the locker room, it wasn't great either behind the scenes. So we want a good mesh of both of those coming together so we can have a very productive season to where even if, once again, the record isn't showing that it's being productive, the players are working towards that common goal of being better as a cohesive unit and being one, which can only help for the future seasons as they keep that continuity. As we all know, the Suns had a lot of roster moves those last couple of seasons, right? Just 2 years ago, they traded for Bradley Beal, had all these veteran minimums. Then they brought Royce O'Neal. Then they were signing other veteran minimums, basically anyone they could grab to throw this roster together to be like, go and compete. It didn't work. Now we're looking at this season. The Suns are taking that step back. They're taking their deep breaths, and they're saying, let's evaluate this. Let's take a guy, let's look at it, and let's see how they grow. And then in a year or two, if they've panned out, if they can fit the Sun system, if they look like they can be legit role players or starters for this team, they'll stay put with Devin Booker. If not, the Suns will have more draft capital, will have more access as well in free out there in the open market to use some of those contracts to go out and flip them to get better players to bring to this team. That's where I stand with all of this. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to today's live stream. I really do appreciate all you guys showing your support here as well down below in the comment section. But once again, thank you guys so much. I'll catch you guys in the next live stream. We'll be live hopefully next Thursday. I'll keep you guys updated on that side of things. And if any news comes out about the Phoenix Suns, we'll keep you guys updated here on the channel as always. So once again, thank you guys so much for tuning in. Hope you have a great rest of your night, and I'll catch you guys later. Peace out.